Now to Washington, social media executives are facing fire right now on Capitol Hill. They're trying to defend themselves against charges that their platforms threaten national security. This comes a day after testimony from a whistleblower revealing foreign spies could easily infiltrate Twitter. Joining us for more on this, Vivek Ramaswamy. His new book is Nation of Victims, Identity Politics, The Death of Merit, and the Path Back to Excellence. Said it all right there. That's all we need to know. But what is happening with this Twitter whistleblower, though, to catch people up on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, on one end of the spectrum, the shareholders approved the deal to buy Twitter. That's no surprise there that the shareholders are going to be rewarded. Now, what's going on with the whistleblower, I think, is interesting outside of the context of Elon Musk's deal, all right? These are platforms that serve interests that go beyond the interests of the United States. And I think that that's what's at issue here, is that if the security of one of these platforms can be compromised, that allows geopolitical actors to be able to use companies, as they've been doing, by the way, for the last several years, as Trojan horses to accomplish their agendas, rather than Twitter to actually serve as a free speech platform in the way that Elon Musk envisions.
So he went to Washington with a clarion call, right? Call for number 3, guys. This is how he explained how what he believes was something that was ignored by the people in charge. Mm-hmm.
I brought concrete evidence of these fundamental problems to the executive team and repeatedly sounded the alarm of the real risks associated with them. And these were problems brought to me by the engineers and employees of the company themselves. The executive team chose instead to mislead its board, shareholders, lawmakers, and the public instead of addressing them.
That's his story now, and I'm sure Twitter would have a different story.
Yeah, I'm sure Twitter would have a different story. Now, I actually struggle with this a little bit, where when you tell companies that they have to accept social responsibility for otherwise engaging in legal behavior, that's a case for the public to actually hold companies accountable through the lawmaking process. Either we ultimately want to actually tell these companies that these are the laws they have to abide by or not. But I'm actually more sympathetic to the idea that we should not actually depend on companies to independently exercise their social judgments, which was the topic of my last book. And you know, part of the reason I wrote this sequel is at the end of the day, I think we have a confusion in our culture at the end of the day of what it is we want out of our companies. Either we want them out of the business of regulating us and regulating what we can see on the internet and exercising independent social judgments, or we want them to be in the business of exercising those social judgments. I come out on one side of that question, where at the end of the day, that's up to the citizenry to be able to revive through its culture. That's not something we want Twitter to necessarily be responsible for. That's the theme of the new book.
It's so strange, too, because on Capitol Hill, you actually have Republicans and Democrats agreeing. For example, there are you can find people in both parties that want to repeal Section 230 that gives cover to some of these companies. But they want it for different reasons.
That's right.
And it's so weird.
It's weird, but it might be interesting. I think these are one, and China's very similar. China policy is another bipartisan area, which is actually really interesting. There could be different paths to getting to the same place, and I believe in both of those cases, still getting to the right answer.
Right.
Tougher policies on China, repealing Section 230, revealing free speech, and yeah, it's a big part of why I took the time to write this next book, to lay out a lot of that case for the revival of shared American identity across partisan boundaries, even though each of the parties may have different reasons for supporting some of those same policies.
I'm going to ask you about your book in a second here, but when you talk about reforming the tech world, let's say Silicon Valley, do you ever really see that happening?
I actually do see that happening.
Who does it?
Well, it's going to be a combination of actually shareholder voices exercise. So whether or not Elon Musk ends up completing this acquisition to buy Twitter, I think he has paved the way for shareholders exercising their voice in the boardrooms of these companies. That does not require state action, by the way. So most of the owners of these public companies, including Twitter, are the everyday citizens of this country through other funds managed by BlackRock and State Street and Vanguard that together historically have exercised the vote. I think a lot of everyday citizens can now say, you know what, it's my money invested in these companies. I can actually tell these companies myself, as a shareholder, that I want to see them represent free speech principles rather than censorship principles.
But how does that work with TikTok?
Yeah, so TikTok is complicated, right?
Because like all the kids, they're loving the TikTok.
Yeah, so TikTok is the perfect example of this Trojan horse problem. Because at the end of the day, the TikTok in China does not propagate the same material that they do here in the United States. And, you know, they're actually, I think it's just an instrument of this broader Chinese mercantilist strategy of capitalism, of using companies to basically pollute the minds of the United States and its citizenry, but not actually allowing that same type of content to be propagated in China. So I agree with you. Private sector solutions are partial. At the end of the day, I do think that this is an area where we need to set the boundaries to say that if you're going to go beyond the role of what a company was supposed to do, taking directions from the government, be it the U.S. government, as these social media companies have started to do, or the Chinese government, which is, I think, an interesting trend that's been under-discussed, then at the end of the day, it's going to be up to the role of citizens to hold those companies accountable to the political
Final
process.
question. We were introduced to you, what, was it a year ago?
About a year
A
ago.
little bit less than that?
Yeah.
And you were into the woke politics of corporate America, and you studied this deeply, and you wrote about it in your first book.
That's right.
Do you believe there has been any change at the corporate level when it comes to that issue, or has it only gone deeper?
I think it's actually been a positive change over the last year. I'm not going to take credit for my book or anything or like this,
listen,
but I think that
Disney comes to mind because of the woke culture and the battle in Florida and the battle in Georgia. But you're suggesting that some of these companies are starting to get it?
Absolutely. And I think economic hardship is going to be one of the things that forces them to get it. You take a look at what happened at Netflix earlier this year, and this is something I talk about in this book as well, is companies, when they actually encounter economic hardship, they saw subscriber growth drop, they saw earnings and profits drop. Well, what does that do? They then say, if you're an employee and don't want to work on these projects, show yourself the door. So I'm actually optimistic about seeing the trends change.
That's an interesting example, too.
In 10 seconds, what happens if you have a nation of victims?
Well, nation of victims spells the beginning of national decline. And in this book, I actually trace a lot of the history of Rome. The fall of the Roman Empire was driven by victimhood complexes, hyperinflation, bread and circuses, exactly what you see in America today. The case I make, though, is there's still a way out. There's a path back to excellence. That's what it means to be American.
Thanks, Vivek.
Hopeful
Good luck with the book.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.